Innovating Education Learning World in association with WISE, an initiative of Qatar Foundation.
Educating boys and girls separately may boost their chances of academic success. That's the view of some educators and an idea that's taking hold in a number of countries where single-sex schools are on the increase. This week in Learning World, we explored the trend in Australia and Sweden, and we also talked to expert Liz Elliott about the pros and cons of this model. In New South Wales in Australia, boys and girls are being kept apart for what local authorities say is their own good. They believe students get better results in single-sex classrooms and are funding 40 such secondary schools. We visited one to find out what the young people themselves think.
Single-sex state schools are increasingly rare in the world today, but 12% of secondary schools here in Sydney are single-sex. The idea is that boys and girls achieve better academic results when they're educated separately.
It caters to definitely my needs. Like, I've engaged in a lot of programs such as drama, music and sport, and really there's, I don't know, any other better school, I don't think, that caters for the male needs.
Women are not banned from the school. In fact, most of the teachers are female.
Girls often mature earlier than boys, emotionally and also academically. So if there's always that competition between girls and boys, then boys can feel that they're inferior. And so it's good for boys' self-esteem not to have that competition.
Some studies show that boys tend to choose subjects traditionally considered to be male, like sports or science, when they're in a mixed-sex environment.
But if I was playing in front of a group of girls, that might bother me whether they enjoyed it or not,
So how come you're allowed in the planetarium after hours?
In 2010, the school implemented a program called Boys to Men, aiming at preparing them to leave school and enter a mixed-sex world.
We learn about stuff like sexual harassment and treatment of women in the workplace, and in particular some bad choices people have made. And the Boys to Men program's a lot about choices we make as men. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things about women in Boys to Men.
In fact, the school's Boys to Men programme is so well thought of that it has won an award from the New South Wales Department of Education and Training.
When we actually think about success in schooling, what we realise now is that what's most important is not who you're sitting next to, but how you're being taught.
Single-sex schools certainly generate a lot of debate on whether they actually achieve better results and on whether it's right to introduce a gender divide in education. To discuss these issues, we're joined by Liz Elliott, a professor of neuroscience at the Chicago Medical School. Professor Elliott, thank you for joining us. Are there differences between male and female brains, and do both sexes learn differently?
There's simply no basis for separating boys and girls based on brain differences. And I would also dispute the idea that boys and girls learn differently. For all the psychological testing of how children learn to read or learn to do math, the brain circuits that both boys and girls are using are the same. And yes, we know that girls read better. What determines whether boys read as well as girls is simply how much time they spend reading. Same thing for the math. So there really is no neuro or psychological reason for separating boys and girls in education. I think boys and girls have been separated for historical and cultural reasons. Parents are comfortable uncomfortable having boys and girls in separate classrooms because of sexual attraction. They believe that boys and girls distract each other.
If there is a lack of scientific evidence, why is there so much favorable information out there about single-sex schools?
The reason people think single-sex schools are outstanding is because there are many outstanding single-sex schools in existence. But this is a historical leftover from the fact that in the old days, if a girl wanted to go to a great school, she didn't have the option of going to a co-ed school. There are these wonderful boys and girls academies whose students are already quite intelligent, who come from very privileged families. The schools themselves are heavily resourced. They have a lot of money and excellent teachers. And so the graduates of these schools do quite well. And that leads to the impression that something about the single-sex nature of those schools was beneficial.
What are the disadvantages of single-sex schools?
The problem with single-sex schools is it creates what we believe is an artificial environment. The world is not single-sex. We need to learn to interact with all kinds of other people, people from different cultures, people with different religions, and people of the other gender. The data show it makes no difference, and we believe it's even somewhat harmful to separate boys and girls, that they lose the opportunity to learn from each other, that boys lose the verbal enrichment of girls, girls lose the spatial and physical enrichment of boys. Because of the fact that they're going to be running countries and running families and running corporations together. They need to learn those skills for interaction throughout their development.
Thank you, Professor Elliott. Tackling gender inequality requires early action. That's the philosophy at one preschool in Sweden, where infants learn there is no difference between he and she. So how do the teachers put this approach into practice? Let's find out in this report.
At the Nikolai Gordon Nursery School here in Stockholm, children are encouraged to think of themselves as people first, boys or girls second.
Det här gör vi för att varje barn ska få en så god
We want every child to develop good self-esteem. That's what's important. Playtime is gender neutral. For example, our toys, such as building blocks, animals and dolls, are non-gender specific.
Då blandar vi dem med små djur och små dockor.
To avoid gender stereotyping, the children here are not called boys or girls, but friends, and are equally encouraged to play with racing cars or the dressing up clothes. The dolls, for example, have no obvious gender, but they do express emotions.
Det är inget fel på orden hon och han.
There's nothing wrong with the words she or he, but we, the adults that use them, are filled with old stereotypes, old traditions, and we're burdened because we classify boys and girls and women and men. Here we want to change that. We don't want to change the children. They don't need correction. We adults need to correct our thinking.
Sweden is considered a leader in gender equality and was amongst the first to legalise same-sex marriage. So it's not surprising that the school encourages acceptance of other people's life choices.
When it comes to family relationships, we have books about adopted children, we have refugee parents in these books, we have books about black and white parents, mixed relationships, single parents, two parents of the same sex, also three parents and divorced parents. We have children's books about all the ways a family can look.
Some people criticise the school's approach, but that doesn't bother the parents who send their children here.
The children's development is the important thing. Here they strengthen self-esteem, self-awareness and creativity. They do a very good job.
Och det är det som är så bra med det.
I want my child to know that he is equal as a boy or a girl, and that he has the same opportunities as everyone else.
Well, that's it for this edition. Are you for or against single-sex schools? Send us your views on this subject on our social media pages. And before we go, here's a word on our edition on early childhood learning stimulation. Some of our fans on social media believe that early stimulation can be useful if it is done in a creative and careful way. Hope you enjoyed the program. See you again next week.
Learning World in association with WISE, an initiative of Qatar Foundation.